We are supply chain.
We are supply chain.
We are supply chain.
Nosotros somos supply chain.
I am my supply chain group.
I'm MSCG, and we're your supply chain group.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So yes, this is called the operations cockpit. So sometimes we shorten that. It used to be called Dispo Cockpit Operations. GIB has been rebranding a little bit. So you may hear us refer to it as GSO right now, the GIB Suite Operations module. So this is really an MRP cockpit. So this works in ECC, it works in S4, it's certified across the board. And this is really the most versatile module out of any of the GIB modules because, you know, there's the forecasting piece, but that butts up against APO, against IBP, production scheduling. If you're using PPDS, you don't need that one. Inventory controlling, some of those aspects are in IBP as well. So this one, not saying that some of this is not part of the tools you guys already employ, but this is a very useful tool for really all companies. We really have never come across anyone that isn't interested in this one. So this is our easiest selling module, especially if you have any of the end users or power users on your demos, because they will want this immediately. Years ago, I was doing a GIB implementation at Gojo, and they were doing the production scheduling module that we looked at a couple weeks ago, and then this one. And we weren't quite ready to go live with the production module, and the users were begging us to let them go live early with this operations cockpit so that they could use it right away. So from a user perspective, they'll see they will see benefits from this right away. And internally, actually, I know, so Tyler spent some time with me on this, and then I know at least at WC Bradley, Tyler, you were able to do a little bit of work with them on this. So you have someone internally you can chat about this with too. I don't think probably anybody else at this point, but I know Tyler's spent some time in here, so he's a good person to reach out to as well. So what we're looking at here is really a condensed view, an MRP cockpit. Sometimes we refer to it as MD04 on steroids. It's really meant to be kind of a one-stop shop for, we concentrate a lot in our demos for the purchasing team, but there are certainly aspects of this that many teams in the company can use. So what I'm going to do today is try to go through the fields we're looking at today, some of the functionality, and then we can always have some follow-up calls on some of the additional functionality. So for starters, the layout I have here is really just a demo layout. There are all sorts of, I mean, I think maybe 200 fields or some that you can add in here. So there's a ton of information that already exists in this cockpit. And if I'm thinking about this, and I'll kind of cater this towards the purchasing side, as I'm thinking about this is how do I prioritize what items I really need to look at? If I've got, you know, 1,000 items assigned to my purchasing group or MRP controller or whatever it may be, this can really help me look at what are different ways I can whittle down my list. I can prioritize, I can look at things that I need to do. So we'll jump out to the selection screen in a little bit. But what I did on the selection screen, or what generally we do, is say, hey, only show me items for my purchasing group that have a purchase requisition in a specific amount of time, right? Maybe one that has a release date in the next 2 weeks. So things that I'm looking at that are relevant to me right now, which then forms this list that I'm looking at here. So we'll come back to some of these buttons. You know, you guys, if you're familiar with MD04, MD06, MD07, you'll be familiar with these traffic lights. These are the same settings. So I've got my define traffic light button up here that's going to let me look at the first the day supply or different exception messages. You can also, in here, is they do have the ability to define customer specific, so client specific traffic lights. Now that does take a little bit of development, but you can change what this is looking at. A request we get a lot is, you know, look at it within lead time for each material or something like that. So that traffic light is kind of, it's, you know, a standard SAP way to start to prioritize your items. Now, these are all negative day supply here, but this is kind of that first way. Secondly, what I'm going to see here is the color of the material. So the material number is either going to have a background of red, blue, or in some cases yellow. And what that's going to indicate to me is one of three things. If it's yellow, that means that that material is set to an MRP type like ND that is not set up for MRP planning. So it's a visual clue to you that, hey, this item is in here, but MRP is not planning that. So it may be, for example, it would be confusing if it was in here now. It would mean that someone would have manually created a purchase requisition, or that a purchase requisition existed and then the material got changed to ND. So that's just kind of sitting out there. So another use for this is actually cleaning up old data. So we could pull this report and say, show me every item that is set to ND MRP type that has a purchase requisition. It'll bring up this list and you can quickly from this screen delete all of those purchase requisitions. So that might just be old data that's sitting out there. Or show me all of my materials and purchase orders that have a past due purchase order or a past due sales order. So we'll get into a little bit of that too, maybe not today with the time we have, but just some thoughts that there's a lot of ways you can pull this. Then we've got the red and blue colors. So red is going to indicate to me that a planning file entry exists. So my net change MRP would pick that up. So if I'm looking at this as a purchaser, I can quickly see, okay, these three items, something has changed with those, right, since the last time MRP ran. So that helps me prioritize, again, what I'm looking at here. If my MRP is running overnight, all of these with this blue background means nothing new's changed. There is no planning file indicator. So maybe I concentrate on these that had something new come in. The red does not indicate that I can't fulfill, let's say a new sales order came in. It doesn't mean automatically that it's negative, that I can't fulfill that order. Again, it's just indicating that that something has changed. Next, I've got what we call the period details. So I really like this view. It's going to show me all of the information that I have in MD04, just in a horizontal view instead. So what I'm looking at for, let's see if I can find a simpler example. Oh, hopefully I'm not getting kicked out right now. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes,
okay.
I can.
Okay,
I can.
good. Well, I'm circling here, so give me.
So this is in our S4, right?
Yep, this is your system. Yep, I should have mentioned that. So this is in the S4 your demo system. Okay, I'm not sure.
Sandeep had a question. To launch this, do you have to use transaction, or is there any Fiori tile?
You can set up Fiori tiles, but right now I haven't done anything as far as Fiori in this system. So it's just right now it's just transactions. So it's going to be /n. So since it's its own namespace, right, it's going to be, we always need that /n /GIB /DCO. And that gets you to the selection screen. We can set up Fiori tiles. We just haven't done that in this system yet.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No problem. I'm going to see. Hopefully this will. Okay. Sorry. I'm just see if I can find a better example for the period details. Okay. This is a good one. So what I see down here then is, again, all of my same MRP elements that I would see in MD04, just a horizontal view of them, which makes it a little bit easier for me to see what my ongoing stock situation is. So I can see what my current planned stock is. Any of these elements that fall in the backlog, so anything before, in this case, this week. However, I can toggle between days, weeks, months very quickly. So now I'm looking at days. So now this backlog is anything prior to today. I'm in a very negative position as far as inventory goes if I were to fulfill my order reservations, my dependent requirements, even if I was receiving planned orders here. So a lot of stuff, obviously, from a data perspective in the backlog here. But what this gives me is a view. This column in red is going to indicate when the end of my replenishment lead time is. So if I were to, in this case, convert a planned order, produce it today, I could expect to receive it tomorrow. And then I see my ongoing view of what my stock is. So let me just click through a couple more of these, see if I've got any that have, this one's an okay example for this. So we've got a lot of customer specific stock down here, but up here in my general elements, I also have safety stock, right? And so I've got a safety stock of 1,000, which will always fall in my today's date. When I'm looking at this view, I can turn that off as a requirement. So in this example, it didn't make, of course, a huge difference, but it is showing my available quantity now. It's not going to count that safety stock, although these didn't change. So this was a poor example for that. You can turn off safety stock. You can remove elements. So if I come back to one that just has a couple here, this might be a better example. So let me turn this safety stock off. I don't know why this is not pulling that as a requirement right now. I'm gonna have to look. Oh, no, it's good. I'm sorry. This is me. So I've got, let me go back to this being on. So I've got 303,000 available right now. Of course, my safety stock then is going to say, actually, I really only have 302,000 available. Because of that, if I turn that off as a requirement, it goes back and says, okay, I'm keeping, of course, it's not doing anything in the background, but it is from my visual perspective saying, no, I physically have 303,000 available. I can also remove other elements from here. So let's say, you know what, I don't have, these are all planned orders. None of these are process orders or purchase orders yet. I just want to remove those from this calculation. So it just hides that element and now says, okay, I'm not really expecting those to come in because I don't have those scheduled. So I'm actually really not in that positive 303,000. I'm close to a negative 690,000 here. So you can mess around with what we're looking at. And you can also turn some pretty simple simulations on, right? What if I were to produce 100,000 today? What does that do to my ongoing stock? Or what if I were to use an extra than 200,000 today? And it'll keep that simulation going over the course. And of course, keeping in mind any of these elements that you have out here. Everything's kind of in the past right now, so it's not making too big of a difference here. So that's that period details. We've got the processing indicator. So this is, again, something you'd be familiar with if you were in MD06, MD07, where as a planner, I can come and say, you know what, I've looked at this item, I'm good with this, and then this indicator will get reset the next time MRP runs for that item. And you can filter on this here then, so it's only showing the unchecked, so that as I check these are removed from my list. So a lot of our planners really like that function where they can kind of treat this as a dynamic list then. Next, I'm going to show some things like my plant stock. What are my total requirements in the next 3 months? What has my total consumption been in the last 3 months? And there's all sorts of, we've got all sorts of other consumption ability to view consumption here. So for example, if I want to look at a graphic of what my consumption has been doing for the last, I think this will show up 2 years. I'm going to click on this graph icon. And now I can see for this material, here's my current month consumption, and here's been my consumption over the last 2 years. So I can get a quick view of that. And I can also see that if I want in some other columns that we can bring in here, or a more detailed view where I can get another pop-up that really brings in just those, in this case, monthly, because it's set to monthly consumption, these values. So I can get consumption views. Here's my stock in transit or in transfer. So if it's a stock transfer that has left the other plant and is on its way to me, I would see a value there. So it's left one plant but hasn't been received into mine yet. What's my open purchase order quantity or production order that That's another column. So again, I'm kind of concentrating on that purchasing side today. When is the date that I'm expecting to receive my first PO? Can also bring in shipping notifications, so the date of my first notification. Are there contracts that exist? If so, I'm going to see this icon pop up and I can click on that and get more information about my contracts. What's my total quantity? What's my remaining quantity, released quantity? What's the validity of this contract? You can click into some of this from here. So as I'm making decisions about what I'm going to purchase, the idea is I can get all that information within the screen. Is there scale pricing that exists? If so, again, I'm going to see an icon there and I can jump in and see this. So if, MRP is telling me to buy 499, I know that it makes more sense for me to bump it up to 500 so that I get a cheaper price. You can get batch information. So is this material batch managed? Yes, if it has the icon, I can click on that icon then to see more information about what batches are out there. In this case, I've got one batch that has a remaining shelf life of -78 days. So I'm expired on that. I can set traffic lights against this. So I can set that as, for example, if a batch has less than 10 days of remaining shelf life, show me a yellow light. Anything above 10, a green light, and if it's expired, show me red. So I can pull that list, that batch list for all these items at the same time as well, and get a list to see, okay, where am I getting yellow? Where am I potentially going to lose this item because it's about to run out of shelf life, and what can I do about that? So you can see batch characteristics, quantities, and not total shelf life, things like that in here. Can also see bills of material and where used list. So if I want to see my multi-level bomb explosion, I can do that in here. So then it's going to pull up not only what directly goes into this item that ends in 21 here, but also then, again, like I said, multi-level bomb explosion, and then information about those items that go into it. So I can see what their stock is. There's overall stock situation, some quantities over here. We'll talk about these in a little bit when I come back up to the top. So you can get a ton of info in here. Same with the where used list, right? So I can say, okay, where is this item used? Can pull that and see, okay, well, this one goes into all of these items, same information we were looking at before. Are there exception messages against this? I know I'm talking really fast right now too. I'm trying to, I have a hard stop at noon or noon my time. So trying to get through as much as I can. Next, we have the vendor. So this is going to be right now, if there is a, let's say there's a purchase requisition or a purchase order out there that's assigned to a vendor. So, could be the fixed vendor or anything else out there. And what I can do from here is I can actually click onto that vendor to see some purchasing history and some purchasing information. So for this item, I can now see my info record. I could click into that to see other things, make changes. I can see my conditions, source lists, and then my purchase order history. So I can see when I've bought that, how much I bought that for. I can bring in prices. In this case, the green color indicates that these are still active POs, meaning these are all still open. And that's because I've been messing around with this item. So a lot of these are probably from me. So if they weren't highlighted in green like this, it really truly means that they're past POs that have been closed out. In this case, they're all open right now. If there were multiple suppliers that are set up for this item, I'd be able to see them all right here. And I could look at them all at once as far as purchase order history, or click through and say, just show me purchase info for this vendor or this vendor, etc. So you get a lot of good info there. I have some text functionality in here then too, where I can leave comments. So it's kind of open comment field. So for example, I left a note on May 7th that says, hey, the vendor's down through October. So maybe, MRP's throwing a bunch of exception messages at me for this item, but I know like, hey, there's really nothing I can do. And it saves me a little time from looking at this all the time. I can click on this to see, hey, there's comment history here. Let's see if I've got any of these that have. Okay, here's one that I added 2 comments for. So on September 30th, I left myself a note to call Betty at AHI, and a couple hours later, I left a note that I say, hey, I left Betty this voicemail. She's my vendor and we're having problems, whatever it may be. We have some customers use this extensively. So to themselves, it could be, you know, if they go on vacation or they're out for a while out sick, that whoever's taking over for them can come in and see some of this information. Some companies use this in lieu of sending a bunch of emails or making phone calls, or they're always keeping the most up-to-date info. For example, even the production team could come in here and say, okay, well, I'm wondering why I don't have these items. And the purchasing team may have left a note, something like this. Hey, vendor down, we're really not going to be able to get these. So you've got this sort of history. And then over here to the right in these period buckets, again, now we're looking at days, but it could be in weeks or months or kind of a mix. I am, in this case, looking at what's called the need for action. You can look at requirements, receipts, stock development, ATP. This is need for action, and I find this the most helpful for most of our customers. So in this case, what this shows me is items, for example, this backlog here of 697. What this is telling me is that I should have used or shipped 697 of this item. And not only have I not been able to do that, I have no receipt element out there for it. I have not converted a purchase rec to a PO or a planned order to a production order or whatever that might be. So if I look at the period details for this item, let's see if we can come up with that here. So what I've got is this planned order that I'm going to remove from there because that wouldn't be in this conversion. And then I'm going to remove safety stock as a requirement as well. So this is really just, oops, my safety stock off, sorry. So now I'm getting to that 697. What this is telling me is I had a forecast in the past and I have a purchase rec release. We can also filter out the releases so that it's only taking into account if it's a real stock transport order. But this is saying, hey, you had forecasts, you don't even have a PO out there. If there was a PO out there that would fulfill this quantity, you wouldn't see this number here. So it's almost like a expedite report, a last minute, hey, you don't have anything out there. And ideally, right, you don't have so much in the backlog, but you may see this that says, okay, sometime after 11/25, there's 17,000, and you can bring more dates into this layout, but there's information, something I haven't done, or maybe in 2 days, if I don't get a PO cut, I'm not going to be able to ship to a customer. And I know I only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to try to power through a little bit more. Last thing I'll show today is actually the overview of purchase requisitions. So this is where I can actually convert and act on some of this information I'm seeing. So what I did there is I just highlighted all those items and said, hey, show me open purchase requisitions. And I've got these subtotaled by the fixed vendor. So I can do some things like I could highlight all these items for one vendor and say, hey, throw those on a collective PO, create one PO for that vendor. I could highlight all of these items and say, create a collective purchase order. And what that would do is go vendor by vendor and create one PO per vendor for all of these items. I know some of the master data isn't totally set up here, so I've been messing around with this liquid sugar, which is why there were so many open POs for that. So I could also highlight a couple rows, whether they're for the same vendor or not, and say, you know what, I want individual purchase orders for these. So I want one PO for each of these line items that I've just highlighted. And so right now what it's doing is in the background, going through and creating that PO. And I can see right here, then it's created PO 73, 74, 75, and so on. I've got some warnings, so the probably can delivery date be met. Okay, effective price is greater than the material price. Here's a roll. So these are all warnings. If they were errors, right, I wouldn't be able to create that. I can come into my PO from here, see it. I can make changes, of course, and do what I need to do. Or I can say, okay, these 5 items, I want these on a collective PO. So in this case, now it's just going to go through and it just created one PO for all of these line items and zeroed these out. So it's not just reporting, it's also execution. I can release recs from here. I can do some, I mean, the simulation function is basically, hey, can I do this without an error? You can do the same thing. So you can also convert planned orders to production or process orders. And like I said, there's a lot of other really cool small functionality in here. Due to time being almost up, I will stop